I'm 73 years old, and I'm about to tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. I'm not saying this to shock you, nor to argue. I'm saying it because at this age, I no longer have any reason to show off or hide anything. What I'm about to share isn't meant to convince you that I'm right. It's only to ask you to pause for a few minutes and listen before you keep running the way I ran for most of my life. By the time I was 40, I had earned $50 million. I achieved what so many people dream of: wealth, financial freedom, recognition. But I'm not proud of it. In fact, that's exactly why I was wrong for a very long time. I used to think success would bring peace. I believed that if I just reached a big enough number, everything else would automatically fall into place. And I was mistaken. We're taught to work relentlessly, to grind ourselves down, to push first and live later. People call that ambition, discipline, the right path. I believed it too. I believed it just like you believe it now. I told myself to keep pushing a little more, endure a little longer, and then real life would finally begin. But I'm not telling this story to brag about achievements, nor to teach you how to live. I'm telling it because I don't have much time left, and I hope you won't have to pay the price I paid to understand these things. The years of my 20s and 30s passed in a cycle that at the time I thought was normal, even admirable. I worked 70-80 hours a week, without seeing anything wrong with it. Late nights became routine. The office was where I spent more time than home. I got used to long meetings in closed rooms, constant flights between cities, deal after deal. My phone was always by my side, even at midnight, ready to buzz with a new email, a new opportunity, a problem that needed immediate attention. I threw myself into building, investing, negotiating, expanding, always feeling that if I slowed down even a little, everything would slip away. I lived in constant tension, but I called it drive. I called it passion, and around me everyone else called it that too. People started mentioning me as a success story, a young man who pulled off big things, someone who knew how to seize opportunities. My family was proud to mention my name. Friends looked at me with admiration, and I believed I had figured out how life worked. I thought I had found the formula: work hard enough, long enough, smart enough, and everything else would fall into place automatically. I believed I was winning, and that victory proved I was on the right path. Meanwhile, things were quietly disappearing that I barely noticed. Dinners cancelled because of work. Weekends spent in the office or on business trips. Small moments that should have been ordinary, but never happened because I was always busy. I started getting used to not being there, and convinced myself it was only temporary. I told myself I was building a future, that later I would have time to make up for it. Later I would slow down. Later I would live, and write in those self-soothing words. A dangerous lie slowly took shape that I didn't recognize at the time. I began to believe that if I just reached a certain milestone, a certain number, then real life would begin. I believed I was different from others, that I knew what I was doing, that I had everything under control. But that very belief quietly pulled me farther away from what truly mattered, day by day, without me even knowing. Everything reached a peak before I realized how far I had gone. The final deal closed with a smoothness that felt almost cold. The numbers on the paper were clear, clean, no more risk, no more surprises. When my total net worth hit $50 million, there were no fireworks, no explosive moment like I had imagined in my head for years. Just a handshake, a few polite congratulations, and a fleeting sense of relief. From the outside, everything looked perfect. I had money in the bank, financial freedom people always talk about, could buy almost anything I wanted without much thought. I had a nice house, good cars, a flexible schedule. To anyone looking in, it was a flawless picture. But right after it all ended, when the phone stopped ringing, when emails went quiet, When no more meetings waited ahead, I noticed something strange. I didn't know who to call. No one really needed to hear this news from me. No one sat beside me to share what should have been the peak of my life. I stood alone in the quiet space, and that silence weighed heavier than any work pressure I had ever endured. For the first time, I felt my success had no witnesses, and worse, no one truly cared. Not long after, my body started speaking in ways I had always ignored before. One night when I thought I could finally breathe, my chest tightened, my breathing grew heavy, my mind spun. I remember sitting on the hospital bed, staring at the stark white ceiling, listening to the steady beeping of machines, and realizing I had never been this scared. Not from pain, but from facing the possibility that everything I had built could vanish in a single moment. I thought about death, about finitude, about what I would leave behind if that night ended everything. And the answer chilled me. Lying there with time to think, I realized a truth I had always avoided. I had lived like a machine, running on schedule, on goals, on my own, and society's expectations. I wasn't really living. I was just completing tasks one after another, racing from milestone to milestone, without ever stopping to ask where I was going. Success hadn't saved me from that emptiness. Money hadn't given me answers, nor filled the growing void inside. Right in the moment that should have been my most complete victory, I began to understand that I wasn't just winning, I was simultaneously losing things no number could ever buy back. After that night, when everything slowed down in a way I had never allowed before, I started looking straight at the biggest lie I had repeated to myself for nearly my entire life. I still have time. I said it to myself when I missed a dinner, when I cancelled a trip, when I didn't call my parents, when I told my kids later. I was young. I was healthy. I had years ahead. And along with that lie came another belief that sounded so reasonable to successful people. Money would buy back time later. I believed that if I was rich enough, financially free enough, I could go back, slow down, make up for everything. People like me are the most likely to believe that, because we're used to solving every problem with effort, strategy, money. When you're accustomed to setting goals and hitting them, you start thinking time is just another thing you can control. But time doesn't work that way. It doesn't negotiate, doesn't wait, and doesn't come back just because you've won enough times. I realized I had been trapped in an invisible loop that I couldn't see while I was inside it. Every time I hit a goal, the satisfaction lasted only briefly. Then it vanished, leaving a void I couldn't name, and the only reflex I knew to fill that void was to set a new goal. Bigger, farther. Success led to emptiness. Emptiness led to craving bigger success. I was running on a wheel with no stop, and I called it progress. I told myself I was building, growing, constantly improving, but in truth I was only running to avoid facing the emptiness inside. I wasn't the only one. I looked around and saw so many people like me, wealthy, accomplished friends who had been praised as role models. One friend made more money than I did, but a few years later his marriage fell apart. He told me that by the time of the divorce, he realized he and his wife had lived like strangers in the same house for years. Another, also very successful, but his children don't want to talk to him. I still remember the words of a child at a funeral. When his wealthy father died young from a stroke, he stood there, voice trembling, and said his father was a successful man, but he barely knew him. That sentence haunted me for years, because I saw myself in it. I also started looking at my own life with different eyes, and the regrets became clearer than ever. My parents grew older year by year, while I was busy with work and big plans. I always thought I'd have time later, when things settled. But that time never came. Calls postponed, dinners rescheduled, Sundays passed in silence. By the time I realized, their hair had turned grey, their health had weakened, and so many stories no longer had a chance to be told. My children grew up while I was always absent. I knew their birthdays, but couldn't remember how they had changed in each phase. I appeared in big photos, but was missing from the small moments that build real relationships. I always had reasons. I was always too busy. I always thought I was doing it for the family, for their future. But the painful truth is that some things can't be made up for, no matter how much money you have. When I look back, the question is no longer how much I earned, but who I left behind while I was rushing forward. I chose money, goals, numbers, and I unintentionally pushed people to the sidelines. And if you're hearing this story and still telling yourself you have time, that you'll make it up later, that you're different from me, then I want you to pause for a moment. Because that's exactly the story I told myself for years. And I only saw the truth when the price was too clear, and many things were no longer recoverable. After facing that truth, I understood that if I kept living the same way, no matter how many more years I had, the outcome wouldn't be different. Change didn't come as a grand decision or a dramatic moment that flipped everything instantly. It came slowly, very slowly, and at first it even made me uncomfortable. I started by allowing myself to slow down, not because I was too exhausted to keep running, but because for the first time I asked why I had to run at all. I began saying no more often, saying no to meetings I would have agreed to instantly before, no to projects that sounded appealing but held no real meaning, no to filling my schedule just to feel important. Each time I said no, I felt uneasy, as if I were losing a part of the identity I had clung to for decades. But right in that unease, I began to notice something I had never had before: space to breathe. I spent time with loved ones in a very different way. No more rushed visits, no more half-present moments with my mind elsewhere. I sat through meals, listened to repeated stories, things that seemed trivial, but were the threads holding people close. I learned to be fully there, not pulled away by guilt that I should be doing something more useful. As my pace slowed, my definition of success changed too. Before, success was always about outpacing others, achieving more, reaching milestones most people only dreamed of. Now success for me is presence. It's being with someone without glancing at the clock. It's being able to sit still without feeling restless, without feeling I'm wasting time. I realize that wealth isn't owning another house, another investment, or a beautiful number on a report. Wealth is having someone waiting for you to come home, not out of obligation but because they truly want you there. It's having relationships that don't require me to prove anything, that don't need me to be more successful than yesterday. There's a paradox that only in old age did I truly feel. I have far less time than before, but each day is deeper. When I was young, I thought I had a whole life ahead, so I lived as if today could easily be replaced by tomorrow. I went through each day in a rush, always looking to the future and forgetting the present. Now, knowing clearly that the days ahead are limited, I no longer want to skip the small things. I started paying attention to quiet mornings, soft afternoon light, ordinary moments I used to think weren't worth stopping for. It's the awareness of finitude that made everything clearer and more valuable. When I compare the two versions of myself, the difference is stark. At 30, I had almost everything society calls success. I had money, opportunities, the feeling I was on the right track. But inside me was an emptiness I always tried to fill with busyness. I didn't know how to sit still, how to enjoy, how to be present without anxiety. I always believed happiness lay in the next milestone, the next achievement. Now at 70, I have far less by external standards, less ambition, fewer goals, fewer things to prove. But I feel enough. Not because life is perfect, but because I'm no longer running from myself. I understand I can't go back to relive the years I lost, but I can live fully the years I have left. And that understanding, late but real, has given me a peace I never touched before, no matter how much money I had. If you're still listening to me this far, I want you to pause and ask yourself a question most of us avoid. If you don't wake up tomorrow, would you be satisfied with the life you've lived up to today? Not what others will say about you, not whether they'll admire what you've achieved, but you yourself in that final moment. Do you feel you've lived true to what really matters? Can you look back and say you've been present enough, loved enough, not missed too many things you shouldn't have missed? If the answer makes you hesitate, or if you're trying to find reasons to postpone the question, then maybe you've understood why I'm telling this story. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, I wouldn't talk about money, strategy, or opportunities. I would say one very simple thing. Don't sell the present to buy a future you might not live to see. Don't trade these years for a vague promise that things will be better later. Later isn't a real place. It's just an excuse to keep postponing the hard but important things right now. Don't wait until you're rich enough, free enough, safe enough to start living, because the moment you think you're ready, it might already be too late. I believed I could make up for everything later, and that was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. Time doesn't work that way. It moves on whether you're busy or not, whether you're successful or not, while you're chasing the next goal. Your parents are aging day by day. The calls you plan to make later, the meals you schedule for another time, might never get a chance to happen. Your children are growing up right in front of you, and every phase that passes will never repeat. Friends who were with you in the early years will gradually have their own lives, then illness, then loss. You think those relationships will always wait for you, but the truth is, no one stands still while you wait for your turn to live. I've seen too many people think they still have time, until they don't. And I don't want you to become one of them. I don't want you to one day, at 73 like me, look back and wish you had stopped earlier, called more, been present more. I'm not saying you have to abandon ambition or stop trying. I'm only saying, don't let ambition swallow your life. Don't let success become the reason you're absent from your own life. You don't need a crisis, an illness, or a major loss to understand this. You can choose differently right now. I can't relive the years that are gone, but you can decide the years ahead. And if there's one single thing I want you to remember from this story, it's this: you don't want to become me, sitting here at 73, understanding everything, when most of the time has already passed. Don't repeat me. Don't wait until you have to regret before you start living. Your time is slipping away right now, and the choice is always in your hands, whether you want to admit it or not. If this story made you pause and think, please subscribe and follow, so I can share more things I only understood after paying with my entire life. I don't have much time left, but if these experiences can help you live differently sooner than I did, then you staying and listening truly means something.